And I am going to mute everybody. If you have questions for Bill, just click on the little chat, raise your hand, and we will unmute you. But we will try to keep everybody muted so that we can hear everything well. Bill, do you have a slideshow that you need to share?
Yes.
Okay, let me do that right now, and so that I can help share my screen with you.
We're all learning this technology together.
I know, we're getting better. By the time I get ready with it, it will be on to something new. Yeah, I've gotten the joy of also learning how to download videos and edit videos. Yeah, I should be putting you to work on this. My son taught you all that. And we have a YouTube channel that we've created so that you can go in and watch our videos. So if you really miss us, Yano, you can see us on YouTube. I'd like to introduce everybody to Bill Tobin. He is from the Rotary Club of El Dorado Hills, California. He's been there since 2004. He had been named by his district as Rotarian of the Year in 2016-17 for his active and dedicated service to Rotary and his commitment to Shelterbox. He began volunteering for Shelterbox in 2010 when there was an earthquake in Haiti, and has helped thousands of Rotarians organize fundraisers and raise awareness for Shelterbox. And he is going to get us caught up on what they are doing and what is going on with Shelterbox. So Bill, I turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me here today. It's no secret. You guys know about Shelterbox. In fact, your first donation from your club was dated 2003. I mean, that's going all the way back to the beginning, pretty much right back to the very start of Shelterbox, and certainly where it started catching on here in the United States. So thanks so much for having me here this evening. Afternoon here in California, but it looks like it's going to be a beautiful evening here. I hope it is there as well. So some of that ancient history, we were started by a Rotary club, and then the club in Lakewood Ranch in Florida started a U.S. affiliate of that organization that was then known as Shelterbox and still is. That was the primary reason the whole thing was thought about, was in a disaster, what do people need, and what can we provide as an organization that could help fill those needs. So Shelterbox was started, and a little known fact, the original goal, I mean, on the original notes of the founding of Shelterbox, they wanted to help 20 families. Now, for those of you who know more about us than others, boy, what overachievers! What a wonderful thing that that wasn't just the end of it, you know. And I think that thought process comes from the very beginning. Now, we're a Rotary International project partner, and what that did in 2012 was just expand we already had a good network, but it just expanded it globally so much deeper for us that it's really helped us as an organization pull together a global network of teams and affiliate countries, mostly Rotarians everywhere that are banded together and helping our efforts. That being said, though, we aren't a Rotary program or a partner, and we aren't funded through the Rotary Foundation. We've been funded ever since the beginning, since your first donations came through, as an independent organization. Now, the tents changed a lot over the years. We have various tents we could use currently, some for extreme cold weather, actually has a wood-burning stove in it. Generally, if you've seen our tents, it's the standard relief tent. But we also do what's called the UN spec tent, which is it's the same model as thousands and thousands of other tents. There's no branding on them, and they're used in areas where you don't want to stand out as being any different than any other aid agency, or there may be nearby conflict and refugee camps and displaced people. A lot of times, these are the types of structures you want. You see a lot of these in Syria, for example. Since 2015, we started doing the shelter kit, and that's tarp-based solutions that will enable us to help families that just have partially destroyed homes. Maybe the roof just blew off, or walls are missing, they could repair their homes. A lot of cultures, they will construct a home and would rather have tarps than tents because they're already looking at the other purposes those tarps could be used for once they're able to rebuild a more permanent structure. And the inclusion of full-size tools, originally we thought that'd just make it easier on them to rebuild and maybe start a small crop or something. But what we found is it was also enabling families to go get work and to provide an income for their family, because these tools aren't necessarily easy to come by, especially after a disaster strikes. This is probably a fairly familiar photo for those who've seen us before. And I know we had Rich was just there about a year and a half ago, I think, and did a personal presentation to your club. So this is pretty much the generic gear that we include or can include, whatever is needed out of this. And there's other items that aren't even on this photo. I guess now, Julia, I'll send you a PDF of all these slides, so if people are on a real small screen or if they aren't on the call at all, they'll at least get a visual of what we were talking about today. The things like the water filter and ground cover and mosquito nets, I mean, things like that are just common sense items that you should have after a disaster strikes. Pots and pans, we don't do food, but the organizations that do food around the world don't always include pots and pans, especially not at the family level. So to be able to give individual families cook sets is very important. And it is really, about the families we help. We're always looking for those that would be most in need, which always would include young children or pregnant women or female-led households, sometimes teen-led households, families with multi-generations, the elderly down to grand and great-grandkids in some areas. And really, of all, it is the kids that are the most vulnerable, because they don't even realize the dangers of environmental exposure, be it the cold or to the heat of the day or sun or wind. And so we've got to make sure we reach these folks after disasters, driving from their homes. And when I use the term home, it's not the types we live in. Those homes don't even exist in most of the areas where we operate, like in Malawi. This is Grace and her kids. She had to put her kids in trees because the water was so deep and so swift when Cyclone Idai went through there last spring. They live in mud brick homes. That could be real convenient. They're good insulators, so they're nice and cool in the summer heat, but they don't wear very well against cyclones. It's like a fire hose on a dirt wall. It's going to just disintegrate it. So her family and thousands of other families literally watched their homes disintegrate while they kept their children in trees overnight in Malawi. Again, it just seems like tarps to us. I mean, these are heavy-duty tarps. These are the types you see temporary event centers use, where they withstand high winds and pelting rains, and they're durable. They got seams that are designed to nail through and stuff like that. But they're still tarps in our minds, our mindset. It's the things we put over our boats or our firewood. It's not necessarily something we consider part of our house, but that's what it becomes where we distribute these, because families simply don't have any home insurance, not in the areas where we operate. And if there is, then the families we reach certainly don't have the capability to have insurance, or let alone a truckload of building supplies that show up, and so they have to piece those homes together over time, and it can take some time. Now, soon after Christmas, in fact, the day after Christmas in 2004, tsunami struck the Indian Ocean. And up to that time, Shelterbox had helped about 20,000 families since our initial deployment in the first year of our existence. In response to this tsunami, we helped over 22,000 families. So we helped as many families across 4 countries here in this one response than we had in our previous history. This was where we really got put on a world stage, not only within Rotary, because this was a big story throughout Rotary, but also beyond Rotary. And the United Nations agencies that do disaster relief took note, and we were included in a lot of future planning. We've now become part of the UN shelter cluster. And all this, again, starting from an idea around a Rotary Club's table and the following of other Rotary Clubs, like the ones, especially down in your district and the surrounding districts that have been a part of this program, since its conception. One of our largest responses was to Haiti. We helped over 33,000 families there. This is when I first learned about Shelterbox. I was a Rotarian for 6 years at this time. I was the Interact advisor to my Interact club, our club's Interact school here at Oak Ridge High School. And they came to me and said, Mr. Tobin, what should we do for the people in Haiti? This horrible earthquake had just struck. And I said, I don't know. I said, why don't you research Rotary and disasters and see what comes up? Of course, you know, they come back 2 hours later and they said, Mr. Tobin, what about Shelterbox? A little did I know at that time what a profound impact it would make on me. It's a huge chapter of my Rotary story. It's changed my career path. And so the moral here is get involved with your Interact Club students, because you never know how they will inspire you. And in response to this earthquake, we helped over 33,000 families. Now, part of our work is helping those displaced by conflict. And I think it's a part of our work that really goes undernoticed and certainly is for us the hardest to get funded. We've been deploying around and in Syria 6 months after the uprising in spring of 2012. By the fall of 2012, we had established refugee centers in Jordan and in Lebanon. And we quickly went from there to northern Iraq, into Turkey, as far away as Greece, and even looking at the possibilities of doing aid as far away as Italy. Also, we're in Syria itself, and we're doing current work there, which is simply amazing. On top of everything else, to be able to get work done there during this COVID panic and pandemic around the world is something to really be a testament of our ability as a Rotary and as an organization ourselves. $1.5 million people. Our original goal was 20 families. Wow, that's really something. Over 300 responses. Last time we responded here in the United States was in 2017. It's getting more and more unlikely that we respond domestically here, as we see the needs around other countries that don't have the safety net, don't have the social impact, don't have much of anything that even close to what we have here. We responded after Hurricane Harvey in Houston and did an amazing job there, working with the health department, putting shelters within big evacuation shelters like the George Brown Convention Center, and made a big impact there by providing some of the basic infrastructures, having health screenings, having a place to pray in privacy, having a place to breastfeed, having a place to have 12-step meetings. Those are impactful additions to an evacuation center, and it made an impact there. But again, there's such great resources available in the United States here that, as I've just told you about that, I've learned of a lot of Red Crosses around the country that already implement those things. That's just another reason why we will respond in the United States if needed, but the likelihood is not that great. Look at the numbers, 88 million people, I mean, just shy of that, displaced around the world because of natural disasters and conflict. A great number of those live in countries that are already well below the median average of income and securities in the world. This partnerships, you guys have been in it since the get-go, so I don't need to spend too much time on this. It's fundraising. It's a yearly commitment. Our HERO program, actually started by a district governor up in New York, has challenged all his clubs in the district to give at these various levels, so every club had the ability to do something. And over 50% of his clubs are HERO clubs. So that's something we've rolled out across the United States since then. Louis Turpin, great guy, past district governor, brought that to us. Our ambassador base, there's a great one right there in your district. You probably know Eric. He's been an ambassador for us. He's a past president of the Cape Coral Club. I think I spelled that right. He paddled the entire Mississippi River by himself and talked to a bunch of Rotary clubs along the way. Raised over $70,000. I mean, that's passionate volunteers right there. And now we've got this Peace Scholar candidate, Britt, she lives in Kentucky, but she goes to school in Denver. She's going to climb all 58 mountain peaks that are an elevation of 14,000 feet or higher this summer with a little Shelterbox, our smaller box, on her backpack frame. And it's going to be incredible. She's done one already just to practice. Now, this young lady's already hiked the Appalachian Trail raising money. She's lived in Myanmar doing work there for kids a couple times. Perfect type of future Rotarian. And as a Rotary Peace Scholar candidate, I hope you learn more about her. Go to our website /14ers to learn more about her. Now, when a disaster does strike in a country, I mean, you guys are right there where you see them every year. So you know the impact that it takes, the effort it takes to get through it. In countries that don't have our resources, Rotary clubs will be vital in connecting us up with groups that will help us do transportation and translations, information. That's such a big part of making our work easier. I don't know my way around your area. I've been to Tampa a few times, but I really don't know the area. If there was a disaster and I came to help, I wouldn't know where to start looking. But if I came to your club, we'd have a pretty good plan together pretty quickly. So that's what we do around the world in countries that don't have quite the resources that we see around here. Well, we've never been a big organization, so we send our response teams are like the size of a volleyball team, just a half dozen, maybe 10 people. So we rely on those Rotarians to be the face of our efforts. It helps on many different levels. Again, translations make things so much smoother if you only have to do it once, and then the group of folks you talk to can do it from then on out. A sense of calmness. It's more efficient. People are more trustworthy when it's locals, especially locals with Rotary emblems on them that are assisting them and not a bunch of foreign aid workers coming in. There's something to be said for that. And we see families on the rebound come back to those Rotary clubs and they want to join and be more involved. I mean, what a wonderful relationship that is. So we're real busy right now. I mean, right in the midst of this global pandemic, we're doing work all over the world. I'll talk briefly on some and more in depth on a couple others. Tanzania is flooding. We're there with Rotary and the Red Cross. Somaliland is both flooding and drought, two extremes on the scale for moisture, but we're doing a response there for that. Ethiopia, ongoing violence. They've made some drastic changes in their political ways and means, changes for the better. In fact, their prime minister won the Nobel Peace Prize last year, but it's not overnight change. So there's a lot of displacement there due to violence. Burkina Faso, that's emergent violence, the same types of situation, changes in policies and politics driving this violence. And that's way up along the border of Mali and Niger. And we're just gearing up. We just got gear in the country there, as a matter of fact, this week. Vanuatu, they have no coronavirus, so they don't want people, but they had a cyclone that did a lot of damage and they need help. Very little Rotary there. In fact, probably about as many people on this call here today. There's 36 total members for the country. So we're working with a group called CARES. We'll get the gear right to the port. It'll be quarantined there, I guess, for whatever it takes. They'll take control of that, and it'll be a complete remote distribution for us, first time in our history. But those are the kinds of changes that we have to make right now. The global response to COVID-19 is multifaceted, and the Shelterbox has a really important part that we're playing in it right now. Why? I mean, what does Shelterbox have to do with a pandemic? Why would refugees or people displaced by disaster be more at risk? Well, it's mainly density. Whether it be a refugee camp, the areas where they have to congregate to live are much more condensed than even the major metropolitan cities. Not in all cases, but in most. Rohingya refugees at 40,000 people per square kilometer, which is about 250 acres. 40,000 people living in a football stadium with its parking lots, maybe. I mean, this is what it looks like. A million people, a million Rohingya refugees live in a refugee city in Cox's Bazar in Bangladesh. We got to help these folks. They're living multi-families per building. You see what a big difference tarps can make in this kind of situation. The second thing is healthcare resources. We saw how closely to overrun New York City became and you did see temporary structures being put up outside of hospitals. We're doing that exact same work right now. We're part of the UN shelter cluster. It's about 3 dozen agencies, food, water, shelter, some other things, and all for refugees. The Philippines right now, our work is not refugee related, but there are refugees in the way south area of the nation. Our work there is two fronts. One, there's displacement because of a volcanic eruption and a threat of ongoing eruption. The other is very specific to COVID-19. The Eversley Hospital on the island of Cebu is already overcrowded with COVID-19 patients. It had to expand, just have more space. As hospital rooms that are more sanitary have to be taken for makeshift ICU, then those folks have to move out. We saw it all. We've seen it. We're living through it. To give temporary structure with what we've done here is allowing them to have room for 100 more patients per day, to be seen for non-COVID-19 related things, or perhaps to be screened to perhaps maybe they will be admitted for potential COVID-19. This is going to be an ongoing situation, but we're geared up to respond all over the world in this effort. On our responses, we have to maintain social distancing. It's kind of strange to see something in a picture like this. It's so foreign to begin with. They have masks. They're sitting apart. Actually, it looks like going through the grocery store now. I mentioned it. Maybe what they're wearing is different, but it's social distancing. The difference is these folks, for many of them, they haven't yet to comprehend the global nature of this pandemic. So they're more susceptible to ignore it or, think that they could pray it away or something. And I mean, maybe they can. I don't know that answer. But in the meantime, we have to make sure they're distanced. It is impacting our ability to reach families. We can't reach as many families in a day. I mean, this would be like going into a football game on a normal picture. Everyone has a ticket, but you don't know where one group starts and the next stops. But here you do. So this is 2 families. One's receiving 2 sets of aid for family size. The other, it looks like, is either going to soon receive their second aid, or they've got the one over there by the tires. The young kid with the box over his head, that just shows me that kids are kids. No matter what in the world, kids are going to be kids. It's important we help those kids. The buildings in the background, those are family shelters where families live next to each other, next to each other, next to each other. No much separation other than maybe a carpet in between the two. Think of the people on this call now, and what are we doing? Well, we might as well be in each one of these tents, right? That's what we're doing. It's the only way we're really stopping this thing from spreading is minimalizing our contact with one another and isolating apart from one another. That's what we're accomplishing right now. Even the Lake Chad Basin, where they already have a multitude of problems. They've got terrorism, been ongoing there for a decade, violent terrorism. They've got an ecological disaster, a drought that lasted over 20 years. Lake Chad, once an oasis, is now sometimes dry, sometimes wet, never the size it was in that last picture. It could take decades, if not centuries, if ever, for this lake to return to its normal size. Boko Haram looks at an area like this, and the game plan's pretty simple. Control the water and control the people. They've been very successful with that strategy. They've displaced 2.5 million people. We have supported several camps in all 4 countries around Lake Chad for several years, but the one we do most of our work in is Minawao. We're the only provider of tents to the incoming people there. We do a lot of tent replacement. There is some permanent housing on the north side. Most of our work currently is in the south area. This is on Google Maps. You can go on Google tonight and take a look at the same picture. The only thing I've added is that little red circle, and that's 50 homes. And as we come in, those are Shelterbox tents. You'll see them scattered throughout the camp. You'll see the more rectangular shelter kit tarpaulin. This is a lot of people. This is what it looks like for people who just arrived. Of course, right now it's a little bit different. They would be distanced. It would take much longer to process people, but this is what it's looked like for several years. You notice these Shelterbox and Rotary emblems there? That's amazing that we're making a difference in this area. But you'll also notice that it's almost all females, and you'll be right. It's 80% population is female. Very similar statistic at all these camps, because when Boko Haram raids a village, they don't even ask questions. They kill the adult males. You know, they've been there 10 years, over 10 years. If you haven't joined them, you're their enemy, no questions asked. What they're interested in are the kids, young kids. Esther at 17 was too old. She wasn't worth killing. It's hard to say that. It's hard to even fathom that, but that's their thought process in Boko Haram. Her 3 older brothers and her mom and dad were all killed in front of her. Her little brother bound for slavery. Oh boy, the little kids, they use the girls and put them in human trafficking, labor, sex, what have yous there. It's horrendous. It's a big income source for Boko Haram. The young boys, they conscript, you know, they do traffic some, they conscript them in their own needs for slaves, for field workers, for servants, and for militia. You see little kids, they don't have a choice if they're told to kill or be killed. They're too scared to fight back. So when those that they discard, the Esthers and the tens of thousands of others that they don't want to take the time to kill and don't see a need to enslave, they tell them to run. Now, sometimes that is running to safety with nothing in the way. Other times, kids that they've previously kidnapped are out in the wings of these villages, out in the fields, out in the forests, out in whatever areas they live in. Not much in the way of forest. There are some trees in areas. And they've got sticks and rocks, and they'll throw rocks and throw sticks and beat people, and that's just the way of life there. So it's a dark, dark story, and I don't like upsetting people with it. But as Rotarians, we need to know Esther's story. We also need to know that we have a few pages in her story, pages of her future, pages of her present. She reached the camp several years ago, 2017, or 2014 when she was 17. She's now married. She has kids of her own. You can see where just a couple of tarps are nothing more than something she uses as a lean-to where she lives. We don't provide sewing machines. It takes a lot of organizations to make these camps operate. And she owns a business, and this is something you would never think someone in a refugee camp, there'd be business. But people want to be of worth in their community. They want to add to the wealth of their community. So trade is very important here. And she's learned how to sew. She's real good at it. She'll trade her wares for toys, for furniture, for the types of things that she can. So there is a bright future here. Again, training people is so vitally important in our work. We aren't going to take the chances, even with gravity-fed water filter, which anybody in this call could figure out. These families are too precious. The water sources in these camps, there is fresh, clean, drinkable water that's filtered after filtration, obviously. There's also long lines for that water, and sometimes families, they just won't bother to take the time to wait in line. They'll go to other water sources where animals bathe, where people bathe, the typical dirty water we hear about around the world. So when you know they're going to do this, you got to at least provide some ways and means to keep them safe. So water filters are very important in these areas. Personal water filters. Again, we make sure we survey the people that we help, a portion of them. If you're improving privacy, people have a place to call their own. Safety and confidence, those are building blocks to peace. If we could take care of the bigger issues that drove them into these camps, maybe a decade from now, they could return. And maybe we'll have a much more stable, positive environment in the future. There's no Rotary in Syria, and I'll be real brief here because I know we've heard a lot about Syria through the years, whereas Lake Chad is kind of pretty much off the radar as far as world news goes. But there's still a massive displacement in and around Syria. We're there. There's no Rotary. We work with other agencies to make sure families are sheltered. It's our gear. We've worked in country before. We've partnered with these groups for several years. It doesn't always come in a green box. Sometimes it's straight off the pallet to the family. but we need to help these folks. And we're adding things all the time in our response work, like soap and wash basins. I mean, even in 2003, if we really thought about it, this would have made sense. But like a lot of things, it took a pandemic for everyone to realize the benefits of something as simple and lightweight as a wash basin and soap that we can include in our aid packages. So this past winter, and her family had nothing but the clothes on their back in Idlib, Syria, the northwest corner of that country. It does not get as cold in Florida. Well, maybe briefly overnight in the middle of winter. It does not get as cold there as it does for the entire night in winter in this part of Syria. 3 dozen kids documented froze to death because of exposure. They had nothing but the clothes on their back and what tattered remains from previous lightweight tarps and garbage that was around to shelter under. Everything you see in this picture was a result of our help. I'm a major donor to the Rotary Foundation. I was past Polio Plus chair for my district. I love it. I read about it every month in the Rotarian. Shelterbox is self-funded, as I said early on. We have to earn our own Charity Navigator rating. It's 4 stars, which is the best, which is fabulous. We've held that for a few years now. We are in the Rotarian. In fact, you can read Eric's, Elsie's story in the I Can't Believe I Did It or something like that a couple months ago. There were a bunch of stories. His was one of them. But I think measured impact in the world, back-to-back notifications that we were Nobel Peace Prize nominees, that says it all. That says it all. We're peace builders. I'll send the link for this. It's next Monday. It's really going to be a great conversation. Rotary Director Cotter from Northeast and Canada, and Carrie Murray, who's Shelterbox USA President. It's live on Facebook. If you're not on Facebook, there'll be a link to see it elsewhere afterwards. There's also another one coming up on GoToMeeting. I'll send that link to you as well, Julie. With that, I know I went a little long, but I don't get down here very often, so thanks for bearing with me a few extra minutes. If there's time and any questions, again, thank you so much.
Very good, thank you. We do have a few questions. Brad had asked, is the permanent for the mosquitoes, and he saw that the light thing, is it battery operated, or was it those just next to each other, the lemonade?
Oh, yeah, I know there's a cord that goes from and it looks like it almost plugs in the mosquito net. That's just a bad picture. The mosquito nets, we use a couple different styles. One is chemically treated, and a different is a microfiber type weave, which is successful against mosquitoes, less successful against things like sand mites. Where we send those is really dependent upon the ability to import that kind of gear. So that's the mosquito net thing. I think there's one primarily that we use now. I think the one in the picture, I can't guarantee that's the most current one or not. The lights, though, the lights are amazing. I've got one right here. There's solar lights. Awesome. There's solar lights. This particular one you could plug in and charge this as well. Typically, I mean, we don't have this one in the field. Most places we go, charging something isn't even possible. But where it is, and we have the ability, we'll include the ones with charging units. But they will last all night on the lowest settings, and they'll last a good 4 hours on the high settings. We'll normally include a couple of them because they're so small, compact, and inexpensive. So if someone had to go to a outside area to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night, they could be safe. You can still have light in the tent or in the shelter. These are made by Luminade. If you ever watch Shark Tank, they were on Shark Tank, I think, like season 6. They made a deal with Mark Cuban. They did a follow-up with them. It was on one of our responses. You see Shelterbox stuff in the background. It's pretty cool stuff. So these are really cool little items. They're commercially available.
Yeah. I bought one for my hurricane kit.
Good for you.
We got him at convention last year.
Yeah. Brad had asked, can the tents be set up inside a building without like everything being staked out? So if you need division, or do you do other things when you're helping to divide out a larger place?
Well, as a matter of fact, we call it shelter in a shelter. So you don't have to put the guy wires down, but you still have to use the poles. So they take a certain amount of size. We've used that several times. That was a great, Hurricane Harvey is a perfect example. In the George Brown Convention Center, there were already cots wall to wall. We'd have to displace people from the convention center to set up tents. It wouldn't make sense. But we did work with the health department there, and we set up the tents in a lot of little nooks and crannies, the little hallways and stuff around the center. And they were used for things like health department screenings. One was for breastfeeding. One was for prayer. One was for families with kids that are special needs. Can you imagine having an autistic child in an evacuation center with 8,000 people? I couldn't imagine myself even being in one. And then outside the Houston area, we did the same thing, but we were able to use like American Legion Hall was one, which was a good size hall. We put tents, our smaller midi tents. I didn't actually have that one in the graphic, but we put those up again, so families had a place to call their own, even though it was only for a period of a couple of weeks. In Japan, we used that. It was real successful there. Culturally, they're inward facing, so they don't like to display a lot of emotions in a crowd, let alone in an evacuation center. We did similar thing there as we did in Houston when we set up some tents within sheltered areas so families had privacy. So, if you had and I'll probably be there someday, if you need someone to change your diapers and you're an adult or a baby, it's nice to have a little private area to do that. And the health department in Houston did a great job. I mean, they even had, they would clean them. I mean, they had a system there long before COVID-19, but they knew about sanitation, of course, to the health department. So they had a table, a couple chairs in each one, and they would, wipe down surfaces occasionally and do that kind of work for us. So yes, we do use shelters inside of shelter.
Kathy had asked if when you go into areas of conflict, do you worry about the violence taking over the box distribution? And what kind of safety measures do you do for your volunteers? And have you ever had to relocate villagers for their own safety?
Okay, 3 questions there.
3 questions, yeah.
So first, where the camps are established, or at least the ones where we're able to operate, I won't say there aren't people closer to the action, but the camps that are established are far enough away from the action that they're safe. Like in Cameroon, that's 150 miles from the nearest, closest, I should say, incursion from Boko Haram, attack of any kind. I'm not saying they're impenetrable, but there is that level of safety. Families are vetted before they're put into refugee camps. So even poor Esther, who did not have any identification, spent weeks in a collection center waiting for her story to be vetted elsewhere and through collaborating people to make sure that everyone is who they say they are. It takes time and it's a hard effort, but it's outside of harm's way. In Syria, the agencies we work with there in Syria, like I said, there's no Rotary, and our people haven't been in Syria in a couple of years now at all. I can't say they aren't outside of harm's way. I can't say that any more than I could say if that kind of war was on our surface, that any one of us would be doing what we're doing today, helping people in our communities in harm's way. Those are those types of organizations. They live there. So they have been targeted before. Our tent specifically, and I got my hands clasped here, thank God, they have not been targeted yet. Other camps, lighting fire to tents has been a form of terrorism.
So crazy. What kind of response has Shelterbox done in the Bahamas?
That's a great question, and it really brings up one of the most difficult things that we come across, and that's our decision to deploy. As I mentioned, we're not a large aid agency. We don't have 500 or 1,000 people who can respond. Our response teams worldwide are about 130 people, maybe 20, 25 staff members also on top of that qualified to do the work. So we have to choose where we respond very carefully. One of the things that we always look for is the international call for assistance. And that came from the Bahamas. First thing checked off the box. The second thing is how many people are affected, how many people are displaced, how many permanently, how many have other places to go to. And in the Bahamas, box was checked. That was assured. How long do they need the shelter? Well, that was easy. I mean, total devastation. We looked for a month or more. Number of families, all that. Yeah, a lot of yeses on that one. Then it came to who else is responding and what are the capabilities already en route. That, when we looked into it, we're a registered agency with the UN. There were 88 agencies on their way to help. Looking through those 8 agencies and what they were bringing, a faith-based agency who does disaster relief and does a lot of other good things in the world, already committed 10,000 tarps. That's more than we could have got there in 90 days probably. That would have wiped out most of our stock that we have around the world. So we knew other groups were responding. Now at the same time, and we sent an assessment team. I mean, we were that close, and it was such a difficult decision for us. They toured with Barry Rassin, they worked with the UN, they worked with the Red Cross, International Red Cross, toured Abacos, took a good look, spent about a week and a half there. But at the same time, Bangladesh had a horrific monsoon season, one after another after another. Millions of people live on delta plains, which probably isn't a whole lot different than the Everglades or the delta here, where there's spits of land that are there and people live there and there's a lot of water in between. So much water came through there, so many people were displaced, millions, who couldn't return, not for a long time, because their land was completely resculpted. Their spit of earth no longer existed. 8 agencies respond. Okay, so, international call, yes. Number of people, time, our capabilities, all considered. Number of 8 agencies responding, less than 50. Looking more specifically to the needs of the people at large, the amount of shelter being dedicated by organizations much larger than ours, paled by comparison to the aid going into the Bahamas. So a real difficult decision. We could do a little bit at both, and really what we could do in the Bahamas would have been taken care of probably before we even got there to take care of it ourselves, or we could make an impact in Bangladesh. We decided Bangladesh, and we stand by that decision. For our organization, that was the right thing to do. Meanwhile, because we're so close to the U.S. And Shelterbox USA, outside of the UK, is the single largest funder of Shelterbox efforts worldwide, there was an expectation that we would be there. Rotary Club sent checks, large number of checks, and large number of figures on those checks, with the memo line, for Dorian relief for the Bahamas. I spent the better part as the Rotary Relations Manager for the entire United States on staff of 2 months responding to those clubs, one at a time, ensuring them that we can't accept those checks, giving them options, mostly the ones promoted by Barry Rassin himself, which he had a list of things to support that effort, and telling them about what we're doing in Bangladesh and what a difficult decision it was. And literally, it was the last 10-minute conversation I just had with everybody here. We retained about half the money for our efforts globally. We lost about half of that money. Not that it was lost, not lost at all. That's a horrible choice of words. The Rotary clubs decided to help the Bahamas directly through other routes, and I thank them for those efforts. Our club did. I want to help wherever I can in the world, and there was a need there. Our club put a little pass the hat around and contributed some money to those funds. It's the hardest decision, second hardest decision we make in our organization is that having to say no when we know there's a need there. The hardest decision, being on the ground, having to look families in the eye and telling those families, I'm sorry, our allotment's up and we have no more aid coming, and then having to turn around and leave. So for us to reach more families, one family at a time, in the areas of the world that are getting the least amount of help when disaster strikes, that's really our mission. And I won't say we won't ever respond in North America or United States again, or we won't ever respond to the Bahamas, because I don't know what the future holds. But that was our decision making last year, and it was. I've only been on the job since January of last year. It was the toughest thing I'd had to do because my heart was pulling in so many different directions. I mean, I'm a Rotarian. I bleed Rotary blue, but I also I have a Shelterbox green. And so for me, it was difficult, but I felt like I knew what I was talking about, and I hope I conveyed that message to you here.
I think so. Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I appreciate you coming, Bill, and speaking to us.
Thank
It's
you.
always good to hear everything that's going on, and I know a lot of us are familiar with Shelterbox, but we have a few new faces, so it's always good to get the update and hear the news. But yeah, if you'll
Thank
share that information, I will forward it on to the club.
I will.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank
All
you.
right. All right, I have unmuted. I'm in the process of unmuting most people. Does anybody have any other questions or thoughts or concerns, things to?
I was wondering if the tents could be reused.
That's a great question, Carol. Yes, they can, but we don't take them back. It's a gift. It's gifted to the families that get them, with the exception of refugee camp work, where sometimes you will cycle some families through a tent over the course of that tent's lifetime as they get placed in more permanent structures, because we know they're going to be there a long time.
Right.
Tents aren't a long-time solution. But yes, in natural disasters, I just downloaded some great pictures. I should have included them, or at least been able to change my backdrop or something to show you. In China, our tents, the old ones, the green ones, I'm sure the old timers, not old age, but been around Rotary a while, remember the green tents.
Oh, yeah.
Beekeepers wanted those because they were portable. They had the mosquito netting and stuff, so bees can't get in them. They could live right amongst their hives because I guess thievery of bees is something that happens there. And I think that kind of because they look like bee honeycombs, but the best tea in Somalia, supposedly, I haven't tried it, served out of what was once the home of a gentleman who got a Shelterbox tent. He's got his home next to it now, and he serves it pot by pot in his tea house, this Shelterbox tent. In Mexico, I think the best Rotary related story, we responded there, and this was before I was a volunteer. This was in the probably early mid 2000s, and we helped a couple hundred families there. And a couple of years later, we went back, and same general area, probably Rotary wise, same district, but I don't know that for a fact. We're helping in another community, and we get there, and lo and behold, here's some tents, Shelterbox tents up. And we're like, well, wait a minute, where'd these come from? They said the Rotary Club gave them to us. Well, it turns out 2 years earlier, when the families were done with them, nice big Rotary emblems on everything. They put the tents back in the boxes, kept some of the other gear that they needed, put the tents in the boxes, took them to the Rotary Club, and here's your boxes back. So, the Rotary Club was literally the first responders after that. And I guess ideally, if that was the case, that'd be great. But it makes such a big difference in the lives of people. And you can't assure its quality the second time out. You don't know how people lived in it. For us to try and recycle them, the cost alone would be not worth the effort.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just a statement, Bill. I guess I didn't realize how much you do with the refugee camps and such too. I basically thought it was just disaster.
Well, I'm glad you said that, Kathy, because that I think is one out of our 300. I think we're close to 350, but I did the math when it was about 320. 30% of our responses out of 320. So, right in the 300 level or 100 level have been to conflict areas. And yet, we as ambassadors and as the organization, I think, have not put that message out enough. And that's something we're trying to change, because these are long, ongoing things. When a hurricane strikes or an earthquake or something, a lot of money comes in at once, and a big effort's made, and great, and other organizations help in the future, rebuilding and stuff, Habitat for Humanity, things like that. Refugee camps have to go on for years. They aren't done in 6 months or 9 months or a year. Right now, the UN says that if peace broke out tomorrow in the Lake Chad Basin, it would take 10 years to reestablish these villages and get the folks, all of them, back into where they want to live. 10 years. And peace isn't going to break out today. I wish, and again, my hands are clasped, but I don't think it's going to happen.
Crazy.
Bill, just a comment that one of our club members went to Haiti to perform some surgeries back before everything was closed down. But he came back and he commented on the fact that the tents are still standing and being used from the earthquake. And I think that was 2011.
Boy,
It's just amazing.
yeah.
Yeah, I know did some tent replacements there about 5 years after the earthquake when Haiti, love the people, but boy, they don't have the infrastructure to rebuild very well at all. I hear so many Rotary projects that go on down there, and I just wish the best for them. But our tents, in fact, after the last hurricane down there, the government told us not to distribute tents, only distribute tarps, because people would transition out of tarps in the more of the huts, I guess, homes that they live in, whereas the tents, that's their home. Now, we could debate back and forth on the merits of one against the other, but we have to abide by the government. So you won't see the most recent tents there are about 2015. So those are at least 5 years old, and there is a chance they're 2013. We did replacement work there. 2010 itself probably had some sort of palm thatch over the top, or maybe a tarp over the top. But yeah, people are still living in them. And it's good to see you, Rich.
Good to see you too, Bill.
All right. Any other questions for Bill? Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. I guess here's a question. I think most of the people who are on, I think most of you are not coming to the meeting next week. Who is planning to come to our in-person meeting next week? Alfred? Ed?
I am.
Christina?
I'm going to Zoom in from work.
Okay. Tony, are you going to come or are you going to Zoom in?
I'm going to tentatively try to come.
Not the best commitment.
I make no
Guys
promise,
will probably come.
but it is my intention to try to be there.
Okay. We are still working back and forth with the Elks to make sure all the technology is there that works. So if they don't have their act together, we will not be meeting there, but Deb and I have been out there twice trying to teach them how to Zoom and how to connect their smart TV to their projector to their computers. And we'll be back out a third time before I think they have it. But our goal is for Tuesday. If we run into any problems, I'll reach out and let people know. But worst case scenario, we will be doing a noon meeting via Zoom if we can't meet in person. But we would like to go ahead and start trying to meet in person and at least have a blend so we can get to be around everybody. They have done a good job of cleaning everything and spreading everything out tremendously. So it should work pretty well. Does anybody have any questions about next week? Okay. One of the things we are doing is we have been asked by the Jubilee Center to do a food drive, a drive for the homeless. Because it's rainy season, they have asked for tarps, which Bill can understand are important. They've also asked for bike locks because with the COVID, bikes have become a quite popular thing and they're running into issues with their bikes getting stolen. So if you that's an unusual thing for a food bank to request. They have asked for tarps, mosquito spray, bike locks, and portable food, things that can be, packages of crackers and other things that are portable, cans that have the pop tops so that they don't have to have can openers, because there are several homeless camps throughout the area and they are having needs. They also need personal, just toothpaste, toothbrush, personal care supplies. So if you are not planning to come to the meeting, if you want to bring those things to my office, you feel free to do that or drop it off at the Elks next Tuesday. Even if you don't stay for the meeting, you're welcome to do that too. Any other thoughts, questions, concerns? All right. Brenda Peckham had a great idea. She's going to start working on it and getting information to us. She said they've had at Brookdale and probably other nursing homes, they've had a real issue with the seniors who've been stuck in their rooms and not allowed to socialize even among the other seniors. They've had a lot of depression and just people dying and giving up. She had in 1 week, they had 8 people die. And it was not from COVID. It was just from being in their room and depressed. And so she is working on a pen pal type program or adopt a senior. So she's going to work on that. We're going to try to figure out how we can work it out. If you know of people who are interested, keep them in mind, and we will definitely get you on a list, and we'll try to match people up. And we thought it might be something we could perhaps match the Roto Kids up where they can adopt a senior too, or the Interact Club. So keep that in your mind. We'll have more information over the next couple weeks as we try to work out the kinks for the program. And I think that's all the news that I have. Everyone should have got an email from Tracy for the installation banquet. If you have not gotten an email from Tracy, raise your hand. Please let us know if you are coming or not so that we can get a head count. We went to Ken and Barb's. It's a nice place. They've done a good job of social distancing. They're limiting the number of people in there. They are doing reservation only. It's a soft opening, so that'll be to our advantage. It is a loud place. It'll be kind of hard to hear, but I think for the most part, it should be a good setup since they are doing a soft out exit, and the food was great. So hope people will join us. And I think that is everything. Let me see if I can share my screen. Does anybody else have any other business? All right, then I will. Let's see if I can.
What's so funny, Tracy?
All right. Tony Babington, would you like to lead us in the 4-way test?
Sure. Hang on a second. The 4-way test of the things that we think, say, or do. Number 1.
The truth.
The
truth.
Number 2.
It's
fair
fair
At
law.
all concerned.
Number 3.
Will it feel good?
Build
good
better friendships.
Number 4.
Will it be
Beneficial
beneficial?
Beneficial to all concerned.
All right. Thanks, guys. Thanks for joining me.
Bye, everybody.
Night, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks, Bill. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Good to see you all too. Thanks.
Thanks.